Good morning. Hey, just to let you know, I know you don't know this, but the guy that did that, he worked on his calves for like 3 weeks to be able to, because that's, okay. So, we've been talking about relationships. We started last week and talking about, especially about as it deals with marriage and love and all those things. And one of the things that happens, especially as we look around and we see other people, is we build some expectations, right? Let's be honest. Most of our expectations come from the culture around us. So the expectations may come from, watching movies or, seeing advertisements and programs. And, it's one of the things I love about love when it comes from movies is, you can watch an hour and a half movie and it always ends wonderfully, doesn't it? And you just think, that's it, and happily ever after, and it's just such a wonderful thing. And they experience, some romantic bliss, and that romantic bliss just goes on and on and on and on forever. And then you get to real life, maybe your life, and you realize this: when it comes to love, first of all, we have all experienced shattered expectations, haven't we? Yeah, we had some idea of how it was supposed to work out. This is the way it was supposed to end. And especially when it comes to romance, we have this idea that the romance was not supposed to end. It was supposed to go on and on forever. And then all of a sudden, when it does end, we start looking around and we see other situations and they say, listen, it doesn't end for them, right? It's kind of like, the idea of looking in the neighbor's yard. I mean, their grass is always green. Everything's working out for them. What has happened to me? What has happened to my expectations and my dreams and the way it was supposed to work out? So the second thing is this, though. I think, if we're going to be honest about love, here's the other part of it. In fact, it will pop up there on your screen. What if the problem is not that love has failed us? What if that's not really the problem? But what if the problem is that we have failed to understand really the depths of real love, what love is supposed to be about? What if the problem is not that love has failed us, but the problem is that we don't understand, we didn't get it, we didn't catch it, what love was really, really all about? In my backyard, Joni and I, our backyard, that's my wife. We have a bird house, and when you put up bird houses, I don't know if you've seen them, but pretty good sized bird houses. We live on a small pond with some other neighbors, and that bird house is there to attract certain birds. Anybody know what those bird houses attract? Anybody have an idea? Purple martins, that's right. Martins come, purple martins, they sort of look like swallows, and they fly kind of like swallows. The males will curve back their wings, and they're really fun to look at. And this is one of the things that I love about in the bird world, right? In the bird family of life. The really colorful, beautiful birds in the bird world are always what? They're always males. Somebody said that. They're exactly right. And I know that you think, yeah, but that's not the way it is in the people world. It's not, I understand. But that's one of the reasons I love birds, because they're always the most colorful, the most beautiful, and they're the ones that fly around. And the females in the bird world are usually camouflaged. They're usually kind of just blend in. They're kind of plainer. They just, because of sitting on nests and things like that. I know it doesn't work that way in the people world, but that's the way it is in the bird world. So I always love it because I'm like, yeah. Because the males, the purple martins, they are this sleek, black, kind of like a sports car. I mean, and their wings swept back, and during the day when the sun hits the back of their feathers, this kind of purple incandescent kind of glow comes off of their wings. The females are brown and gray. I mean, that's just the way it is. And they don't usually do all of the acrobatics flying around and all too. But let me tell you what happens in the bird world, and this is especially with purple martins. The females will go to the houses, and they will try to decide on where to nest and where they're going to build their family and which house they're going to use and all to. And then all of a sudden the males come around, and then the males are chasing the females. I mean, they are all over the place, making all kind of noise. They are singing. They're strutting their stuff. That's what they're doing. And they're trying to do everything that they can to attract the female and to draw her to themselves. And I mean, they just chase and chase and chase. And I don't know if you know this, but this is almost always true in the bird world too. It is the female that makes the choice. It is. Ladies, you should applaud at that. That's it's a female. The male chases, the male tries to attract, the male puts on a show, and in the bird world, it's the female that makes the choice. But this is what I love about it. Now, birds, this is just instinct for them. They haven't thought this through, but I want you to think this through. Once they make the choice, and once they kind of pick the nest, and once the female has picked which male, they actually work together as a team. They do. They will sit the nest together. They will take turns back and forth as they still go off and do their stuff. The male still will go up in the air and put on a little show and all that stuff. And as they hunt for, things to eat, and as they try to come in and repair the nest, but they will trade off, and they will take turns protecting and sitting on the nest and watching and guarding and all the things that they do. They will work together as a team, as a partnership. Now listen, that's instinct for them. But there's something about love for you and I that we have to learn, that we have to figure out. It's just because we're made differently. We don't just act off of instinct. We actually think through things. And so God comes in, He speaks to us, and He tries to teach us what love is really all about, what real love is all about, and how to build things and to do things that actually last and build a future and build something that's long lasting in our lives, something that really matters, not just something that just kind of feels right for a moment. So this is what Paul writes in the book of Ephesians, and I love this passage because he speaks of love maybe in different terms than sometimes we're led to think about love. And this is what he says. This is in chapter 3 of Ephesians, verse 16. He says, "I pray that from His glorious unlimited resources," he's talking about God in that case. And the reason he describes God in this way as glorious and unlimited resources is because God is going to deal with you and I who have less glorious and limited resources, right? But God is not that way. I pray that from His glorious unlimited resources, He will, catch this, He will do what to you? He will empower you. He's going to fill you up. He changes you, He empowers you with inner strength through His Spirit. Then Christ will make His home in where? In your hearts. As you trust in Him, your roots will grow down. I love that image. It's that plant image. Your roots will grow down into God's love, and growing those roots down into God's love is going to do something for you. It's going to keep you, say it with me, it's going to keep you strong. It's going to keep you going. It's going to give you a different future as far as futures are concerned, because you would understand and agree with me that plants that grow roots deep into good stuff, into good ground, have a better chance of surviving, of lasting, of producing, of yielding a harvest, of growth. Sure, of course they do. And then he goes and say in verse 18, he says, "And may you have the power," catch this, "and may you have the power to" what? To understand. In other words, to catch it, to get it. Because he understands that some people don't seem to have that power. They just don't seem to catch it. They just don't seem to get it. And I've talked to a lot of people, maybe you have too, that have said, I've gone through life and I went through things, I made all kinds of mistakes, and I had, shattered dreams and shattered expectations. Of course we do. And just to let you know, listen, I didn't want to go through those things, and I understand that you don't either. No one wants to go through shattered dreams and expectations. But we go through them, and then all of a sudden we learn and we figure out there must be something more, and we find a depth that causes our roots to grow deeper and to grow stronger. And in those places, it changes everything about our life. So he's saying here, this is what I pray. I pray that you may have the power to understand, as all God's people should, catch this, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep His love really is. Because it changes us. Changes everything. When all of a sudden we understand, we see just what God's love is all about, what He wants us to understand about it. And then he says in verse 19, I love this part. He says, and may you experience the love of Christ. That's actually what he's talking about. That's the love he's talking about. And may you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great for you to ever really fully comprehend, understand. You won't ever really fully figure it out or understand it. But he said, but I pray that you will find the power to understand so that you can experience it and so that you can grow stronger in that love. Here's the third thing. God's love, it does something. God's love grows, and I really like this. God's love can stretch. God's love can. I was reading a book by a guy named Gary Thomas. I don't know if you've ever read this book, but he wrote a really great book called Sacred Marriage, pretty lengthy. And in the book, Gary actually talks about something that I think really helps if you read it and you catch it and you understand. And he talks about in there romantic love. And this is what he says about romantic love. He says the problem with romantic love, when you build a marriage or the relationship on romantic love, here's the problem. Romantic love has no elasticity to it. It doesn't. Romantic love is never really designed, not really made to grow in that way. Romantic love, in fact, he says, is fragile. The romantic love can easily be shattered and broken. That's why romantic love in a couple, in a marriage, the way God has designed it, romantic love is something to be protected. It's precious. But it's not the same as the roots, the kind of love that God wants to teach you to grow in any relationship that can give you longevity, that can reach down and find strength. It's not that it's not important, it's just that you cannot build any relationship just on romantic love. And if you're like me, and I'm sure you are, you've gone through sort of the stage in life, or maybe you're not there yet, you will, where you thought you could, you thought it worked that way, because most of the time the movies and the shows and the books and all are written based on that kind of love, because that's the kind of love that does what? It attracts us. We're drawn to that. The problem is you cannot build on that, because that kind of love has no elasticity, as Gary Thomas says. He's right. It has no ability to stretch and grow. That love is made to be protected as a sign, as a show of the commitment, and it's made to be shielded because it is easily shattered, and there's a fragileness that's there. To that. I just want to throw out a moving on in your outline. It says moving on to real love, because I'm going to jump to a chapter. But before I do, this is kind of a side street. This one's absolutely free. You don't have to pay for this. But it just kind of reminded me this week about God's love and about what real love is all about. I have a friend, and she on the and her family, but she always posts on the little tear outs that her prayer request, and every single week she writes on there all her prayer requests, and the very first prayer request is always to pray for a lady that's her friend who does not know Jesus Christ. And it's on there every week. In fact, it has been on there every week for 25 years. In fact, we kind of make a little bit of fun at it if it's not on there, because every once in a while she's not here, which is very, very rarely. And even if she isn't, she usually emails it in. But every once in a while she's not here and she doesn't have it on there. And her friend's name is Colleen. And we all know, every staff member knows the name and knows that's going to be the very first prayer request that she puts on there, to pray for Colleen and her salvation and for her to know Jesus Christ. And for 25 years, so that means, I was trying to add it up, how many times I've prayed just among that group, because we all break up and pray individually, but how much time I prayed, how many prayers have gone up for her. And it has to go into the thousands and thousands, of people that I know. And this week, because you kind of see those things and you can kind of, laugh about them and say it's always going to be there. But this week, I saw her and she told me, oh, by the way, and then all of a sudden she just lit up. She said, I got a phone call because my friend Colleen went and has been meeting with a counselor. It just so happens that counselor is a Christian and has been, as she's working with her and helping her through, whatever, the things she's working through with the counselor, she said, Colleen called me to let me know that she had given her life, put her hope and her trust in Jesus Christ for the very first time. And the reason I share that, and you can get excited about it too, because it makes me excited, is because sometimes what happens is we give up. We get our hopes dashed. We even make fun of it. We can kind of, kid about it. Yeah, I used to believe that, used to believe in love or something like that. We give up and we quit on it, and we just don't realize that it's not something you should give up and you should quit on. Because God's resources and God's ability to stick with things and do things just goes, just amazing. 25 years. And of course, I know she'll be on the prayer request. I know that Colleen will be on the prayer request. It just won't be the same as it's been, all these years. But God has plans. I don't know if you realize this, but God, you can pray, and you should. And God sometimes will answer yes, and He'll answer your prayers right away. Anybody had prayers answered? Sure. Sometimes He will answer, nope, not my idea. It's not what you need. I know better than you do. Sometimes, as in this case, God will say, not yet. And what happens is sometimes when we hear not yet, we just quit. We just give up on things. We think it's not worth pursuing and not worth chasing because somehow our expectations haven't been met, and we just say, why do that anymore? And then sometimes, to just let you know, there's a fourth answer. Sometimes God just says, are you kidding me? And he moves on, because like, why would you ask, But sometimes God just says, it's just not time yet. And God there's a patience to God, and there's a longevity to God, to who He is. And I know, this is why I think in the Bible it says, and it reminds us, as best you can, if you can do this, I know that this may not have been, where you're at, but as best you can, stay to God, especially it says, stay with the wife of your youth. Hang in there. Keep working at it. Don't quit. Don't give up on it, because some of it you have to grow past these expectations that are going to break and are going to be shattered, and mainly because you've just put your hope in the wrong thing. You've expected the wrong thing. And God says, listen, I want to teach you something more powerful. I want to teach you something that has greater width to it, greater depth to it, something that has the ability to outlast the things that you're trying to hold on to that were never made to last that way. In fact, those things are just things that need to be protected because they're much more fragile. Instead, you need to build your life upon the things that are going to give you real strength and real depth and real width, and are going to stretch you so many times also. They're supposed to. They were made to stretch you also. So this is what I want to do. In looking at and talking about real love, I want to go to a passage. It's going to be real strange because in the book of Corinthians, there is a passage called the love chapter. And it's maybe one of the best known writings about love that there is. And it's in 1 Corinthians. Anybody remember the love chapter? It's 1 Corinthians what? You do remember that. Okay, 1 Corinthians 13. But everything is in context, right? And even with these writings that are there and the things that Paul writes to the Corinthians, the church that was there in Corinth, all of them are in context. He writes to them because they have a lot of problems. Anybody relate? They got a lot of struggles. They have a lot of questions. There are things they can't figure out or they're not doing well. And so Paul writes to them about those struggles and the difficulties that they go through. And when you grow and when you learn, what you do is you stretch down, and as you're dealing with problems, and you deal with those problems and you find some really strong, deeper things to talk about that take you through those things. And all those problems just kind of point you deeper and deeper to the things that really matter. I think that that's why we go through those things. And that's certainly what Paul himself, is writes about and is talking about. So this is in 1 Corinthians. And so I'm just going to back up from 1 Corinthians 13. I always tend to do this and say, what is the context? And we could go a long way back. I'm just backing up to the chapter right before that, because in this chapter, he's dealing with some of their problems. I know you're going to say, what does this have to do with? Hang on. This won't take that long. You have nowhere to go. This is, okay, I'm sorry. Here's verse number 1. Listen to what he says. Now, dear brothers and sisters, regarding your question about the special abilities that the Spirit gives, he's talking about spiritual gifts. Because when someone becomes a believer, when they give their life to Jesus Christ, what they realize is that God has given them certain abilities. And God's Spirit works in their lives with those special gifts and those special abilities. Every believer has them. And all of our abilities and our gifts are different. That's just the way he's designed it. And in this passage, he reminds them, you didn't pick your abilities and your gifts. You didn't pick, what you would look like. You didn't pick what you were good at. It was picked for you. So it's up to you to learn how to develop them, how to build upon them, and then what to do with them. Where do they fit and how do they work? And you can really mess that part up if you're not careful. And they did. They got their abilities and their spiritual gifts, and they tended to do what we do, is they said, this is all about me, and this should point to me. And he says, whoa. No, there's something so much bigger and more important, even when it comes to the things that God has done for you and the gifts that God has given you, and he's given them to all of us. So he says, your questions about spiritual abilities, the Spirit gives us. He says, I don't want you to misunderstand this. Verse 2, that when you were still pagans, that means you didn't know who Jesus Christ was. You weren't following God. You were just following a kind of secular view of the world. He says that you were led astray and swept along in worshiping speechless idols, and they did. They worshiped all kinds of Greek gods and Roman gods. He said that they were just things carved. But so in verse 3 he says, so I want you to know that no one speaking by the Spirit of God will curse Jesus, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. And I know you're thinking, what in the world is he talking about? So let me tell you real quickly, because it really is important, and it really is an important part of this story. What he's talking about is the early believers, even in those cities outside of Jerusalem. A lot of them, they were being taught Jesus in the flesh and blood part of Jesus that came, the person that was there, that's not God. That's not the Son of God. And the reason was because in their thinking and how they had grown up in their thinking and in their pagan kind of view of it, anything flesh and blood is flawed. Anything flesh and blood cannot be God, because God is separated from them. And even with Jesus, and you don't catch this, I don't catch this fully, even with Jesus was crucified on a cross by the Romans. This part you should be able to figure out. Anyone crucified on a cross by the Romans, they're crucified on a cross by the Romans. Why? Because they're a bad person. They did bad things. In fact, really, really, really bad things to warrant the Romans crucifying them on a cross. And so for them, crucifixion and being put on a cross was not something that they celebrated or they gloried in at all. I know we wear crosses. I know we have a different view of it. That is not the early church. They did not wear crosses. And they did not celebrate, an image of the cross, because for them, socially, as far as the culture was concerned, this was such a shameful thing a humiliating thing, an embarrassing thing, that it was difficult for them. It was only as time went on, as they kept looking back, that they realized and began to celebrate. And then culturally, as our culture, crosses just become something that someone wears, and it's acceptable. And most people that wear crosses have no idea, what it even means. It's just a piece of jewelry, to them. But for them, boy, they understood. And so teachers were coming, false teachers, and saying, listen, that wasn't really the Son of God. It couldn't be. You know better than that. Anyone crucified on a cross could not be, and that's why it says anyone who says that Jesus is cursed, in other words, this man that they're talking about, that couldn't really be God. Of course it was God. Of course it was God. And no one could say that Jesus is Lord except by the Spirit. That's what he's saying. Because the only people that could say that Jesus, that physical person, was Lord of all the universe is a person that gets it, that catches it, it's been revealed to them. They understand it. They really have got it. And he's saying this is a really big deal, guys, that you guys understand that Jesus on the cross was the ultimate expression of God's love for us. That he would take our shame and our guilt and our social disdain and all that they would feel even talking about it in their day. He would take all of that on himself so that it'd be taken away from us to free us. That's how deep and how powerful and magnificent his love really was. Now, all that to say is, it's also incredibly life-changing to catch how deep his love was for us. So then he goes on to say this in verse number 4. He says, there are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same what? Spirit. He says it is the source of them all. There are different kinds of service, things that we do, but we serve the same what? Yeah, one. And he's pointing back to him again. God works in different ways, but it is the same God who does the work in all of us. So he's pointing this back, to one God, one love, one source of all this, even though we are all different. So here's what he's pointing out. First of all, ignoring real problems never fixes anything. Because in this passage, he's going to address this struggle and this problem. And it's true in life, right? Ignoring problems never fixes anything. In fact, what Paul is going to say is actually addressing the problems and looking at them, it can cause us to find powerful things, deep, important things that will take us through stuff that we have to go through. If we will not ignore them, act like they don't exist, but actually dig down and say, listen, I need to dig down and find these things, why I'm going through these things. Second thing is, he says these things we go through, these struggles can be real opportunities for us to grow, for things to change, if we'll look at them that way. And Paul is doing exactly that. And then the third thing is that real love has this quality of holding different people, different views, different parts together. And so this is what he does I'm skipping all the gifts that he does in that passage. I'll come back to those in a minute, because I'm not really dealing with, a lot of people go to this passage and they want to talk about spiritual gifts. I'm talking about something much deeper, which is actually what Paul gets to as he's talking about these gifts. And this is what he says in verse 18. He says, but our bodies have many parts. We're all gifted different. And God has put all these parts just where he wants it. He says, how strange a body would be if it only had one part, right? You know any friends they're just a nose, right? Or they're just an elbow? Yeah, it'd be really weird if that was all there was to it. But there are all these parts and gifts and things that he's put together and made one body out of them. Yes, he says in verse 20, there are many parts, but only one what? One body, right. There's something fitting us together. The eye can never say to the hand, I don't need you. The head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. So then he says this, which is really important. He says the most important parts are actually the most difficult to recognize so many times. Or they don't usually get the most significance. And this is what he says in verse number 22. He says, in fact, some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important are actually the most necessary, right? So anybody here, Anybody ever seen, taken out and looked at your lungs? Ooh, gross. But would you say that your lungs are not very important? No, you'd say, no, without my lungs, I don't make it. But you know what we do give a lot of attention to? Our hair, right? You know, because people see the hair. We see the hair. We give it, and listen, we could fall into the trap of saying, my hair is the most important thing, right? Or you know, my hands are the most important thing, you know, and look at those, or you know, my face, because that's just how we look at it. But he's saying, listen, but the most important parts, actually the most difficult to see and recognize and to see. I went in one time and they gave me an X-ray camera picture of an internal organ. And, you know, they said, we want to show you, and this is what you're paying for, or your insurance company's paying for a lot of money. And I said, how do I know that's me? I don't know what that looks like, you know. That could be anybody's, you know, liver or anybody's lung or anybody. But you know what I realized? I go in, this has got to function. This has got to work, because without that, I'm in big time trouble. I mean, that's the part that is most important inside of me. He says in verse 23, and the parts we regard as less honorable are those we clothe with the greatest care. Yeah. The parts that you don't want to see are actually parts that you cover and you clothe, you know, because they become more precious to you. So we carefully protect those parts that should not be seen, while the more honorable parts, he means the more showy parts, do not require this special care. So God has put the body together such that extra honor and care are given to those parts that have less dignity. In other words, the parts you don't really want to see on somebody else. But they actually need more care and more protection in life, because they become the vital parts inside of us. Verse 25, he says, this makes for harmony among the members. The parts that you see, the parts that are more showy, and the parts that are less showy, but actually more vital, so that all the members care for each other. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. And if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. In other words, your lungs love it when somebody says, you have really nice hair. But what you'd really like to know is, do I have really nice lungs? Are they going to work out? Are they going to work well? Is my liver doing good? Because I don't see it. I don't know. It's covered. It's protected. But it is absolutely vital inside of me. Next one, number 5. Protecting what is most important, and this is what he's talking about. If you protect what is most important, this is what brings real health in your life and real strength in your life. And I'm saying all this because he is about to set up something. He's about to set up the most important thing in your life is not what you think. It's not the parts that you tend to be, or the things that you tend to be drawn to necessarily. But they're the things that sustain you and make you strong and make you healthy. And so he goes on at the end of this chapter, and he actually is addressing the gifts. He says, are we all apostles? He's saying that's a gift that God gives. He makes someone like that. Are we all prophets? Are we all teachers? And he actually he's kind of listing them, viewing them in the ones that have sustained the body, the church itself, and are necessary. He says, do we all have power to do miracles? Do we all have the gift of healing? Do we all have the ability to speak unknown languages? Do we all have the ability to interpret unknown languages? And then he goes on and says, of course not. We're all different. So you should earnestly desire, say this with me, the most what? Not the most showy. This is the point he's making. You should earnestly desire and recognize that there are gifts and abilities and people that everyone may not recognize how important they are, but you should protect that part. And he's taking us somewhere. When he's doing this, he's trying to take us to a place in life to say, I want to teach you about something. In fact, this is how he finishes that chapter. He says, but now let me show you a way that is best of all. He's going to go into then the love chapter. And then as he begins the next chapter, you know how he starts the next chapter? Pursue love. Because he's not talking about romantic love. Even for marriage or something, he's talking about God's kind of love. He's talking about the love that grows, the love that stretches, the love that brings power to your life, the love that sustains you through difficult times, the love that gets through 25 years of praying and praying and praying, and then all of a sudden, now you see, you look back and you say, wow, look at all that I went through, how difficult it was, but look at what sustained me through all of those years, through all of that time, and I wouldn't want to go back and go through it again, but I sure am glad I went through it. Because it was in going through it that I found out what was most powerful and what was most, worth protecting and holding on to. And it may not be the part that you think is the most important, but then you look back and you realize, man. So I put in your outline number 6, setting all this up, is there's the part that you didn't know that you didn't know. You just didn't realize how important it was. But as you go through life, you look back and you recognize, man, that's the part that mattered. That's the part that carried me through. That's the part that sustained me. Now, I know you're like, but what about 13th chapter? Next week, you got to come back next week. Because what he's going to do when he goes to the love chapter, the power, he's setting it all up. He's going through all of these problems, all these difficulties that they're going through. And as he's doing it, he's building it all up, and he's saying, but I'm going to show you the best way of all. I'm going to show you how you get through everything. I'm going to show you how you find strength to endure and not just come out surviving, but you actually come out thriving and growing and stretching. And your roots grow deeper. And your life actually becomes bigger and more encompassing that it could ever become before, because even though you are limited, there are only a certain amount of things that you can do. God is not. And God has the power, His kind of love has the power to stretch us and grow us and expand our world and expand our lives to something that later we realize, man, it was all worth it. It was all, worth everything that we went through, everything that I learned, everything that I grew through. Man, it was all worth it because of who God is and because of what He's done. That's next week. Let's pray together. And as we pray, I know that there are people here because we're all this way, that you've just gone through some dreams and hopes, and it's been really hard to come to grips with those things that I wanted to build my life upon. Actually, none of those things were able to hold up my life or strong enough that I could build my life upon those things. And as you look back, especially if you have continued to trust God and believe God, you look back and you realize, you know what? But God has built some things into my life. He has sustained me with some things. I never would have spotted them. I never would have known that was the most important thing. And God, through all this, has actually made me stronger by teaching me about real love, about what really matters. Listen, all of us go through heartaches, difficulties, disappointments. And rather than just ignoring them or acting like they didn't exist or quitting and giving up, God is the one who calls us to Himself. Say, bring those things to me. I will teach you through them. I will heal you through them. I will take you through those things, and I will show you things that you could never have figured out by yourself. Things that have a hope and a future. Things that last. As Paul will say, things that never fail, that never let you down. Because they're the things of God Himself. They're not learned quickly. They're not spotted easily. But boy, are they powerful. If you're here this morning and you've never put your hope and that God really does love you, and that God has not given up on you, and that God sent his son Jesus Christ into this world, and he endured all that he endured. He went through everything that he went through so that you would know he understands your life. He knows, and he knows what matters, and he knows what lasts. And he gave his life, sacrificed his life, so that all of your sins and your faults and your failures and your disappointments and your shattered dreams, none of those things would prohibit you from knowing God, prohibit you from the life that he has for you. He came to take all of those things so that you would know that God has plans for you. God's heart still longs for you. It reaches out for you. God has never given up. He has never quit. God's love is long, deep, wide, tall. It continues to reach out and grow and stretch to those that God loves. In Jesus' name we pray.